Hey, congratulations.
So much.
Congratulations for your film Unseen, being showcased here at the Asian Pacific Film Festival. How does it feel for you?
Well, I feel super excited. The LA Asian Pacific Film Festival has been a big part of my journey as a filmmaker, so it feels like a homecoming, returning here in a way, and being able to screen the first feature that I've worked on. So blessed, grateful, all the things.
Oh, so you were at this film festival before?
Yeah, like I've been here at this film festival. Like I've had my short films screen here, even during the pandemic. So I feel like, and also like in terms of artist development, this film festival has also been a big part of my journey and the people that I look up to. So all that to say, like really a homecoming.
Wow, that's pretty awesome. Now, I've checked out your documentary. It is very interesting, to say nonetheless. But let's start with that very first question: is what sparked you to do this documentary?
Yeah, so I have been a community organizer in immigrant rights for the last 15 years, since I was 18, pretty much. And should I pause?
Oh, so go ahead.
Keep on going. Okay, sounds good. Sorry, yes, let me start again. The chopper kind of startled me. So I have been a community organizer in immigrant rights for the last 13, 15 years, since I was 18 years old. And in the movement that I have been a part of, there's not really a lot of discussion about the experience of being an immigrant and also being a person who has a disability. And when I met Pedro, I was helping to run a program for other undocumented youth. And Pedro was one of the first individuals that I came across who was living this intersectionality. At the time, it was just like us getting to meet. There was no sense of like, we're gonna work on a film to begin with. It was just pretty much connecting as individuals. But then as time flew by, I reached out again to Pedro, and as I also navigated, the journey of continuing to grow as a community organizer and as a storyteller, I sensed this need of importance to uplift the experience of being an immigrant with disabilities, and that's pretty much how it started. But 7 years later, over the course of 7 years, Pedro and I met in 2015. We started filming in May 2016. It is now May 2023. And for the course of those 7 years, the intention for filming changed, actually, from that initial perspective. So, yeah.
So, what was the intention at the beginning and what you ended up with? Can you describe that?
Yeah, and spoiler alert, this kind of shows up also in the film, but the intention in the beginning was very much like just talking about the issue of having a disability and being an undocumented immigrant. And pretty much it confined Pedro's story into just the parameters of his identities. But as I came to learn more about Pedro, and I think also as I came to learn more about myself, the intention to continue filming has kind of shifted from this political, socio-political context to more of like a personal experience. I found so much of myself in Pedro, and I feel like by the end of the film, we both kind of had a sense that, wow, this film has been a big part of our healing journeys, and how do we navigate life as a community, leaning on each other. And by the end of the process, I think ultimately Pedro and I were filming because it was, maybe for me, I'll speak for myself, filming with Pedro, getting to learn more about him kind of maybe saved me to a certain extent, from feeling this loneliness that I have to go through life in a certain way. But now I realize, somebody else is going through a lot of the things that I'm also going through. And maybe let's follow that journey instead of discovery, self-discovery, instead of just focusing on the political realities that Pedro is going through.
Now, how did you convince Pedro to participate into this project? What did he thought this was?
That's a great question, Gig. I feel like, oh sorry, let me get more comfortable. Yeah, I also hope I didn't mess up the framing.
No, you're
but,
good.
I was just gonna say, so when Pedro and when I first reached out to Pedro to ask him about filming, he was still a college student. He was much younger. You know, I was also much younger. And when I asked Pedro, you know, he pretty much said yes. I guess maybe, for lack of better words, he easily said yes, you know. But I think 7 years ago, we didn't realize that the film would be the film that it is now. You know, like, we had our premiere in Toronto, like, in another country, pretty much, you know, in an international film festival. You know, and we have all these supporters from these different film institutions, you know, and hundreds of people getting to watch the film. All that to say, like, when Pedro said yes, like, I think he was thinking that the project is a smaller project, you know. Mm-hmm. Also, when you're younger, maybe you had less to lose in life, you know. If you ask Pedro now, maybe it would be helpful to ask Pedro now, you know. But I mean, but in the course of the last 7 years, I would say, like, that first response, you know, and as things kind of, like, became more real, I think reality kind of hit us in a more, like, visceral way, and there were moments of hesitation, reluctance, doubt, even, you know. So I don't want to negate those, but in the beginning, at least, there was a strong and easy, confident yes. But from there, you know, things just kind of unfolded the way that they were supposed to unfold.
How did you feel about Pedro changing over the course of those years? And because we also noticed you've changed over the course of those years too.
Sure, I'm kidding. Oh, yes. You know, hopefully I don't digress too much from the question, but when I think about change, right? You know, I think in essence, stories are about change, you know, especially when you're following the story of a person. I think the most exciting stories are the ones that convey transformation, change, whether for the better or for the worse, you know. But I feel like every human being has the capacity to become something that they never thought they would be, or become the person that they've always, you know, wanted to become, you know, and really go through the journey of growth to become that person. I reflect on who Pedro and I were when we first met, and who we are now, and who we'll continue to become as individuals, and I just feel so grateful that in spite of the, you know, it's really difficult as a human being to, like, not just be content with who you are. You know, like, that inner work, like, as an individual, and working on oneself, it's, like, not easy, you know? So all this to say, like, I feel really humbled, you know, that both Pedro and I have been willing to experience change, you know, internally and maybe even externally, and respond to the circumstances of our lives in ways that have allowed us to become the person we are now.
Now, of course, audiences, when they have a chance to watch this film, they're going to remark about the cinematography, the choices of basically creating it on a perspective from a blind person's perspective, and you go in and out throughout the entire film. Could you talk about making that decision and how you accomplish that?
For sure. And that's actually a question that has come up often. Maybe I'll start, you know, when Pedro and I first started filming. Sorry.
That's okay.
My phone keeps vibrating. Just put it on. Do not disturb. Put it away. Excuse me. When Pedro and I first started filming, you know, the film is about a person who's blind, right? So I felt like it would be kind of unethical and just maybe wrong even, you know, to make a film about a person and they don't get to enjoy that film. So how do we make a film that Pedro himself, as a blind individual, would also enjoy just as much as another person who is sighted, or, you know, someone else who's not blind? And in essence, I asked Pedro, so how do you consume media? Like, how do you watch films? You know, because films are so visual, you know, films are so visual. And how do I invite other audiences to really enjoy the film, in a meaningful way. And Pedro was the first person that really taught me about audio descriptions. And if for folks that are not familiar, audio descriptions, you can often experience them through streaming platforms, but they give pretty much narration and description of the visual elements that's happening in the film during the pauses in between dialogue. So in essence, you're watching a film by listening. So the aesthetics of the film pretty much is geared towards centering the viewing, quote unquote, experience of people with disabilities, particularly blind and low vision people. So the film has a lot of experimental cinematography, maybe also blurry, out of focus footage, because we want to invite audiences to watch a film by listening instead of just leaning into the visual cues. I think often when we watch a movie, we rely on the visual information we get and sound becomes secondary. In Unseen, we're kind of flipping that idea so that audience members who are blind, low vision, and rely a lot on their hearing to experience the world, can enjoy the film in a way that's primary and centers their sensibility. And at the same time, we also want to reach, maybe deaf and hard of hearing audiences. So how do you do that if you make a film that's all based on sound, right? So for that reason, when folks watch the film, they're going to notice that there's open captions in different colors, to indicate that the film is also bilingual. There's different things that are happening in the film, and really the film centers this aesthetic of access, for as many people as we can.
All this done during post-edit, right?
No, actually. So
No.
we shot the film. So when I would shoot the film, there were times that I would not shoot with a lens. I would cover the body, the aperture of the camera with a tape, poke a hole on the tape, and I learned this trick from a mentor, Christy Tully, from many, many years ago. And when you poke a hole on the gaffer's tape, you allow just so much light to go into the body of the camera and create an image from that, So aside from, filming with no lenses, we would also film with lenses that have a very shallow depth of field. There's this other lens called I think it's called tilt shift lens, where the lens can bend. Pretty much we experimented with different kinds of lens to make sure that this is because the idea is that from the get-go we're gonna make the film in a particular way. So a lot of the blurriness, 98% of it was done in production and maybe 2% done in post.
Most excellent. Now, back to Pedro. When, in life, a lot of people usually have one big struggle, but for Pedro, he has multiple struggles. During the process of your production, how did you observe? How did he keep on going? Because it seems like most people would try to give up in this process.
Yeah. That's a really, really great question. And I hate speaking on behalf of Pedro, but maybe, speaking of how there's a lot of similarities between me and Pedro, maybe what I'll say is maybe there's something in the human spirit, that kind of tries its best to cling on to something, And I think for Pedro, what I've known about Pedro is that in spite of all the struggles and the challenges, he often says that life is not about going through the struggles independently, but rather leaning into each other as a community. In the film, you'll notice that Pedro is surrounded by a lot of people, his family, his friends, his mentors, his educators, his community, in essence. And I think a lot of us, whether you're also I think in the undocumented immigrant community also, I'm Filipino also, and I think in our communities, there's really a strong desire to lean into each other. I think it's in Filipino, I'm not the most, I feel bad because I'm not the most educated with Filipino culture, but there's this idea of bayanihan in Filipino culture where I think what bayanihan means is back in the days, folks would to move their homes, literally you would call the community to help carry your home, literally your home, carry it on your shoulder and move it to a whole new location, but you can't do that as one person, it's a heavy load, so you bring in your people together. And I think for Pedro, he often talks about how it's really, he's here, to my point earlier about changing as people, it's really difficult work to grow as human beings and to navigate the challenges we face in life. But when we recognize that there's people around us who care about us, who love us, who wants what's best for us, I think that's how, we're able to get through the challenges we go through.
So where's Pedro now?
Pedro will be here in the film festival, actually. So for folks that are, depending on when you're watching this, Pedro will be here in our US premiere at the LA Asian Pacific Film Festival on Saturday, May 6th. And he will be joining us for a Q&A, so that's an invitation pretty much, to join us. I think Pedro is on his way to continue living his best life.
Most excellent. Well, it sounds like you had a really good experience doing this documentary. What about you? What is up with you now?
What is up for me now? Where do I? Maybe I'm like, what part? Maybe okay. Sorry. Okay. What is up for me now? So, Unseen is the first feature-length film that I've worked on. And just yesterday, actually, it was announced that the film is being included for the 36th season of the PBS documentary series PBS. So it will have national broadcasts throughout the U.S. and U.S. territories sometime next year. And also, for myself, as I navigate continuing filmmaking, I think I'm just really taking in what's present with me now. Over the course of the next few weeks, we're going to be screening in other film festivals. Also, actually, the same time we're screening here in LA, we're having a second screening in Toronto at the Hot Docs Canadian International Documentary Film Festival. And then next weekend, we're screening at the Center for Asian American Media Film Festival, CAMFest, in the Bay Area. So what's next is a lot of just bringing the film out into the world and then taking it one step at a time.
Well, it's excellent. Well, let me wrap it up with one last question with you, Set. Mm-hmm. As audiences have a chance around the world to watch your film, what is the one most important take that you hope they walk away with?
Oh, wow. Okay, that's a great question, Gig. I think, like I mentioned, like you've observed, right? Pedro navigates a lot of challenges in life. But like I responded earlier, I mentioned that Pedro, and I think like so many individuals, we get through the challenges in life by recognizing that there's people that love us. I think Unseen, what it's about, one of the things that it's about, thematically, is vulnerability. How do we take down the walls that we use to guard ourselves? Maybe those walls protect us, because we've been hurt before. And there are challenges in life and we have to, keep our guard up, and that's totally fine. But I think at some point also we have to let people in. I think Unseen is just as much about what we show people, and I think the film's aesthetic just kind of ends up lending itself to those themes. And I think ultimately what I want audiences to take away from the film is that, yes, life is difficult. Life is really, life sucks often, Like Pedro shouldn't have to go through the injustices that he goes through in life. None of us should have to. But when we recognize that there's other people around us that cares for us, I think leaning into that love and receiving love. Sometimes receiving love is just as difficult as giving love. So I think for our audiences, we really invite you to be reminded that whoever you are, no matter how difficult life is, please remember that you're not alone, and that hopefully at some point you'll be able to let your guard down, receive that love, and take it for yourself.
Well said, Seth. Congratulations. Hey,
thank you so much.
Thank you so much for carrying this conversation for Unseen, but many thanks for you to make this very unique film for the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, for having me.